Welcome to the best news right now. Tonight we have a special segment for you, the mass media and political agenda. Thanks for that. Now let's move on to the next story.
Politics are intertwined with the media, and the media has evolved from print to electronic, and so has politics. In the 21st century, the American political system has become a period of high-tech politics, which the behavior of citizens and the policymakers and political agenda itself are increasingly shaped by technology, and elections are now rely heavily on the media, with a drastic change of putting 60% of a candidate's campaign budget towards TV ads rather than signs or door-to-door campaign.
Thanks for that. Now let's move on to the next story.
Thanks, Harvey. Speaking of mass media, let's talk about the massive pain in the butt, press conferences. Presidents before Roosevelt did not provide press conferences, but Roosevelt changed that. He held weekly press conferences to inform the media. Press conferences are meetings between public officials with reporters asking questions. While in FDR's day, media was a friend to the politician, it transformed into questioning just what the government was up to. After numerous scandals like Watergate and Monica Lewinsky, the media stopped taking what politicians said at face value and really started to evolve into investigative journalism, which has a much more negative view towards governmental officials. To have journalism, you must have something to write about, and that would be the two types of media, electronic and print media. Print media includes newspapers and magazines, while electronic media is radio, internet, and television. For hundreds of years, print media was the only source of media, but in the 1930s, with the invention of radio, the switch to electronic media became fast and took America by storm. Electronic media became as popular as it is today because of television. Instead of hearing the news, for the first time, Americans could actually see the news and watch presidential debates.
Back to you, Harvey.
Thanks for that. Now let's move on to the next story.
With the increase of use of electronic media, the government needed a way to regulate it, so they created the Federal Communications Commission. The FCC's responsibilities are to 1. Make sure there is not one company or person in charge of the broadcasting market, 2. Conduct examinations of stations in order for them to have and keep a broadcasting license, and 3. The FCC has many fair treatment rules concerning political campaigns. Broadcasting is to go after a large audience covering a variety of subjects. This was what stations were early on, but nowadays we have what is called narrowcasting. Narrowcasting is stations that are focused towards a specific group on a specific subject. For example, if you would rather watch sports than this, you could go to ESPN. With cable, there are many more channels than there were before, so people can really just watch what they want and avoid what they don't have any interest in. This goes into selective exposure, which is when people watch the news sources that tend to go along with their political viewpoints. Another change with the news that has happened because of cable is the focus of many stations has switched from providing good factual news to doing whatever brings in the most money.
Thank you for that, the Anthonys. Now we go on to Professor Fairborn, who's an internet specialist.
Thanks, Harvey. It's great to be in the studio. As you said, I specialize on internet topics. With the adoption of the internet into our daily lives, we have all the information we could want at the click of a button. If you want to find out what the results of the midterm elections were, you can. Or what year FDR's New Deal was announced. Or even if you're wondering how many licks it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop. It's all there, just a few keywords away. With access to all this information, you would think we would be more politically informed as well. However, the top searches during the 2008 presidential debate were YouTube, Dragon Ball, Naruto, WWE, Kanye, and RuneScape. We've got our priorities in check. As you can see, these searches would indicate that to internet users, politics are just a peripheral part of their life and not the sole focus. America's media is privately owned, unlike many other countries, like Canada, where the government owns the media. With American media, the best media, being privately owned, they are allowed to be subjective and criticize the government because they aren't owned by the government. Back to you, Harvey.
Thanks for that. Now let's move on to the next story.
When reporting the news, you first have to find the news. In finding the news, you have to know your audience. You want the story that will get the best reaction from the masses. Major news organizations send their best reporters to beats. Beats are specific locations from which news often emanates, such as Congress. News that might or might not become a big story often starts as a trial balloon. A trial balloon is information leaked to see what the public's reaction will be. Many times the leaked information deals with politics because journalists and politicians have a very strong symbiotic relationship. Next, after finding the news, you have to compress it in order to present it. The name of the game is to seize on the most interesting, controversial, and unusual aspects of an issue, says Jody Powell. Now with technology, media has been able to pass information along a lot quicker, however, it is less thorough. Soundbites have gotten shorter and shorter as time has passed, and journalists also have to be able to avoid certain issues. Some argue that political reporting is biased towards liberals. The overriding bias, however, is what story will draw the biggest audience. A talking head is a shot of a person's face. Viewers find this boring and go to a channel for a more visually stimulating channel. Now on to more about the news and public opinion.
The public's support or disapproval of something largely depends on what the media displays. The media has a huge impact on how the public evaluates specific events.
Okay, so policy agenda is like every issue that is currently important to people involved in politics. A bunch of different groups, like interest groups and political parties, are always trying to fight for interest on the agenda. Activists depend on the media, like this man depends on me to get their ideas out. Hey, political activists, who are also known as policy entrepreneurs because they invest money in an issue, what do you want?
Frankly, I want the right of homosexual marijuana to choose whether or not I can own a gun that shoots vaccines at people.
Okay, so how are you going to get that?
Press releases, convincing columnists, writing letters, etc. Bullying the media into getting what I want.
Yeah. Cool. Leave now. That guy was crazy, but he's powerful because he got media attention. Some people think this is bad and say that now you can't form your own opinions as freely and just have to decide whether or not other people's opinions are right or wrong. I don't know. But poor people also have access to media too. That's how civil rights happened. Because long-term positive news is more helpful than short-term negative news, these interest groups and other policy entrepreneurs often turn to PR to make themselves look good and important. That's it.
This just in. The media is a linkage institution from the government to the media. The media's job is to keep the government in check. So surprisingly, there's three branches of government. We got number one, presidential, Congress, and judicial. And surprisingly, when you don't allow people to televise an event, they won't watch it. Who would have guessed? And that's the case for the Supreme Court. While the president gets a whopping 69% of the viewership, the Congress only gets 21%. This is a big disparity, and you can see that people just don't care about what's not publicized, even if the Supreme Court is making the big decisions.